are here, episode 1 of the Poochie Cast. And I've got a theme tune for you. Ready?
Yeah.
Well, he's Poochie to the D, and he's here to say, I'm an anthropomorphic dog from outer space. What? A nunchuck spinning, part Fonzarelli. He's the rap and surfer dog from Gangster City. He's got a radical, fresh, proactive paradigm. A cool cat, 10% more rastified. To the extreme, getting busy, son, just like your cow if you got one. I'm rough Poochie, the rockin' dog. I've got to go now, my planet needs me.
Yes.
That's the theme tune for the Poochie Cast. So, come on, hit us with the lowdown. What's the deal?
Poochie has appeared in 8 episodes in 30 years, so we're looking at all of them. Everything that we look at here is Poochie hasn't been anywhere else on the TV show. We've got it all.
It's a bold claim. Part A. Who is Poochie? Lord Zaz gives us the lowdown.
Yeah, these are the notes I made from the pre-clip. It's interesting because they can't with Maude we're just taking some stabs, whereas they actively lay out exactly who Poochie is and what he should be in the pre-clip and in clip 1.
Exactly. Now, we will get to clip 0. Extensive notes on clip 0, so hold that goodness. But in a nutshell, in 30th seconds, let's say someone right now, they've stumbled into the Poochie Cast and they're like, what is this Poochie? Am I going to commit the next 90 minutes to listen to this madness of hot dumpster fire? Or is it going to be a burrito in the shape of a dog? Tell us.
Poochie's a rocking dog.
Part B, backstory. So, part B, I've said, I'm going to give you a blurb that doesn't cut too much into clip 0. It's the meta fiction. Jumping the Shark, an essay I'd like to entitle Jumping the Shark, the Uneasy Dance, not by Jack Derrida. A meditation on brand extension and obsolescence would make Cerebrus the Aardvark very happy, wouldn't it, if that was his name?
Yeah.
Before production of season 8 began, which in all actuality would make The Simpsons the longest running primetime animated show, passing the Flintstones, which they did with this very episode that we're talking about here. Several executives at Fox suggested the staff add a new character to the show who would live with The Simpsons on a permanent basis in a bid to freshen up the series. The writers found the suggestion desperate because basically it's things that they've tried. Every set of executives seems to have tried this on a TV show in the last 50 years. And it's clearly a sign of desperation. Therefore, this entire episode and the character of Poochie and Roy, because let's not forget this is the Poochie and Roy cast, even though we haven't mentioned that yet.
No.
The writers mocked this then, and basically this tactic never ever works and only ever interferes with the heart and core of the show. In this case, The Simpsons, but also the well-oiled machine of hyper-violent slapstick that is Itchy and Scratchy. Now, just before I get your take on this, now give me your take on that.
Okay. It can be done. It can be done occasionally, but not as in your face as this. Like they gave Buffy a sister like 5 seasons in, and just sort of made it, like adapted it to the plot, and it sort of worked. And but yeah, this was like a trait of like the Flintstones did it with that little green alien, didn't they? And there's like a Cosby Show one, isn't there? Or there's something where they bring in like a cousin, isn't there? Like, oh, this is etc. And he's always been here.
I don't know about that one if he's always been here. I mean, I'm thinking to the Jack Black episode of Community. I know we're always banging on about that, but Jack Black does that where he's like, oh, I've always been in your class and now I'm in your group. They do with Deadpool. They did a great comic where they reset the original Secret Wars where Deadpool was in it. But that's different because this idea is that they're going to bring this character in permanently. And I think the Buffy one is one of the few examples where it worked. But the most heinous perpetrator of this is Scooby-Doo. Because Scooby-Doo has done it at least 3 times. He's done it where he brought in his like cousin, the country cousin, which is a classic trope. Then they brought in Scrappy-Doo, the little version of Scooby-Doo.
His nephew, isn't it?
Scrappy-Doo is his nephew, yeah.
Which
But
implies he has a brother.
Well, there's all the family, but the worse than this, during the TV show The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, they brought in a little Hispanic kid called Flim Flam, a small doe-eyed orphan who was a liar and a huckster with a wild mop of black hair. He was alongside Scrappy-Doo, so they didn't get rid of Scrappy. They brought Flim Flam in alongside him, I got this off a blog called Nathan Rabin's Happy Place, and it said, Scrappy-Doo isn't even the purest example of the Poochie effect. Incredibly, Hanna-Barbera apparently took a long, hard look at the squeaky-voiced, obnoxious, precocious, odiously conceived menace and thought, we can do worse. Enter Flim Flam. And just not because at least Scrappy-Doo fits in with the universe somewhat. Flim Flam was literally just a child that began to hang around with them. At that point, I think it was just Scrappy. I think it was just Shaggy, Scooby, Scrappy, and Flim Flam.
Very weird.
Yeah,
they got rid of I vaguely remember them getting rid of Fred and Daphne and Velma for a while, actually. What is funny about this is, though, it kind of, in hindsight, worked. Like, it wouldn't have worked had Poochie or Roy stuck around, but they're certainly both very liked characters.
Well, they do argue that The Simpsons eventually did kind of hit. About 3 or 4 seasons after this, The Simpsons did actually dip, and then they did start to maybe do a little bit more of bringing characters in just for a short killer. And they did that kind of jokey Simpsons spin-off spectacular show. There is an argument that The Simpsons, although they made fun of this, they then essentially went and did it in a kind of way, but not really. So we'll get to a lot of that when we get to the core, the meat and to veg of this. But how about I throw you a little Poochie quiz before we get to the content? How do you feel about that?
Do it.
Number 1, how does Krusty try to persuade the audience that Poochie will never return?
He died.
No, but he goes further than this. He does something basically. So he
says something about never showing it again, doesn't he? So
Krusty shouts, Poochie's dead, happily, and they all cheer. And then he pulls out an affidavit, essentially a legal document saying that swearing that Poochie will never return.
No, I forgot about that.
Question 2. These are hard questions, to be honest, unless you're a Poochie fan. I think if these were Maude centered, you'd bat them out of the park, but you're going to struggle. Question 2. When might we see Poochie in the sky over Springfield?
Following his death, pretty much all I've got. Dogs can't fly.
No, but in the real sky over Springfield. He's a balloon in the Springfield parade.
Yes, he is. I almost included that.
Yes. Now, we're going to come into a bit of conflict here because you gave me a different number. But how many appearances, including mentions, do we have of Poochie in the Simpsons TV show?
Including mentions. I imagine there are a few, like the balloon, for example, and maybe like merch, some Poochie merch knocking about. So I'm going to say 11.
22 according to some Simpsons site, and 8 in the comics. So I think, we could scratch out as Poochie Cast 2 and probably even 3 if we really went for it. Question 5. I know I've skipped over question 3, but who's counting? Question 5. Poochie is dead. Yes, but where is the proof?
The proof is the as you just said, Krusty, with the legal document.
I like your logic, but actually, and apparently in the Simpsons Road Rage game, you can see the name of Poochie. Where can we see it?
Pet Cemetery.
Yes, half a point for that. You see Poochie's name in the Pet Cemetery.
Is it the Hit and Run game? Not the Road Rage.
Simpsons Road Rage. I don't know more than that.
I feel like there's no cemetery in that game.
2 more questions. Who else auditioned for the part of Poochie? Not all of them. In fact, maybe none of them were actually in the show, but in the script, at least 3 other people auditioned for the part of Poochie.
Otto did. I remember Otto. Comic book guy and Ruth Powers.
Very good guess. So the names I have are Lisa, Mo, and Rainier Wolfcastle.
Strange.
Wolfcastle did not get the part because he demanded $1 million per episode.
Was that what was in the script?
Apparently, that was in the script.
They've already had the episode. Oh no, they've not yet. The Radioactive Man episode where you can't say up and at them, and you just keep saying up and at them.
Question 8. You may have seen this because you have the DVD. What was David X. Cohen, who created Poochie and wrote this episode? What was David X. Cohen's initial pitch or vision for Poochie? It was very different.
I don't know this one. Was it as in the original pitch, like Roy, or the original pitch within the show?
It was the original pitch of what Cohen wanted Poochie to be in this show.
Oh, something like a camel.
Nobody does reference Joe Cool, I think, Joe Cool's the Snoop, isn't he? Joe Camel from the Camel cigarettes. He does mention that. But here's what Cohen apparently says. He wanted to make Poochie super annoying because he was wealthy and aloof, and Itchy and Scratchy were laborers in Poochie's gold mine. Poochie was sat on a velvet throne surrounded by bags of money. He's drinking champagne and whipping Itchy and Scratchy and lecturing them on the value of hard work in a capitalist society. Finally, Itchy and Scratchy get fed up, plan their revenge, in which they're going to give him a bag full of money with a syringe full of poison inside it. The plan backfires because Poochie is offended by how small the bag of money is, and to demonstrate how worthless it is, he sets it on fire, therefore burning Scratchy to death, and then uses the money to light his cigar with the syringe falling out onto Itchy's foot and killing him.
Wow, that's more on the nose, I would say, in that Poochie is just then a direct representation of the people who asked for Poochie, rather than a rocking dog.
Yeah, rather than satire, it's really just a very
right. That seems more hateful than what Poochie ended up becoming.
I think actually the satire in Poochie is spot on. So good that they went with that. Now, there's a bonus question before we move on, because this has been a very long quiz. What is arguably one of the most famous Simpsons lines that was introduced in this episode?
It has to be "I want to go to the fireworks factory," doesn't it? When are they going to get to the fireworks factory?
That's a good one, but there's a more iconic Simpsons line that appears in this episode, not directly related to the show, but talking about the show.
Is it the one where they're saying, how would you feel if somebody was watching us in 30 years' time?
No.
From Lisa.
I'll give you a clue. Worst.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, because he goes to the store, doesn't he? And it's one of the first examples of comic book guy talking about like internet culture and going online to post his disgust. Yeah,
and they mock. There's something like the notes of when they play Itchy's skull. The notes he plays C, G, and E, but clearly the notes are D, F, and E. So that Bart says, "Hey, I know it wasn't great, but what right do you have to complain?" Comic book guy, as a loyal viewer, I feel they owe me. What? They've given you thousands of hours of entertainment for free. What could they possibly owe you? I mean, if anything, you owe them.
Worst episode ever.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So just before we start the content, I sent you one of the photographs of that comic book called Poochie. Now, is that the card that comes along with, what is that? What is that fake comic book cover that is Poochie?
Yeah, I think that's just it will be from the Simpsons comic, just like a Poochie bongo cast. I don't think it's a standalone sort of thing. I think it would have just been a comic within the Simpsons comic.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's just that picture or whether the actual comic that accompanies it exists, but maybe we'll do some.
I think so.
A Poochie too late. Who knows?
Yeah, I have a couple of pre-clip. I've just listed the things that Poochie's desired traits.
Yes.
If you'd like me to list them.
I would, because I got a whole bunch of notes we're going to get to about this, so let's go for it.
Also, my favourite line in the pre-clip is when she says he's the original dog from hell, and the man says Cerberus.
And,
That was funny.
And she just blanks him, right? So he says Cerberus, and she just totally blanks him like, yeah, we don't really need your smart answer here.
Yeah, this is not Lindsay Naegle, but kind of. The traits Poochie has or should have are edgy, in your face, gets busy consistently and thoroughly, funky, proactive, attitude, sunglasses, hip-hop context, Schmear of surfer, rastified by 10%, and coloured in sunglasses.
Yes. The coloured in sunglasses were what gave him that extra little bit of attitude. So you sent me the clip 0, as I've called it, which is from Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie, episode 14 of season 8, written by David X. Cohen. And what I liked about it is it's the double fiction, because we get to see the creation of Poochie in a way that we always dreamed of seeing the creation of Maude. Now, of course, this isn't really how Poochie was created. So there's a double fiction. He's a fictional character inside the fiction. So see, Krusty and Roger Myers Jr., they're talking about the animal chain of command that goes mouse, cat, dog. Tom and Jerry references abound. I love this quote. Poochie needs to be louder, angrier, and have access to a time machine. 1. 2, whenever Poochie's not on screen, all the other characters should be asking, where's Poochie?
These are Homer's suggestions, aren't they?
Oh, is that Homer is saying those?
I think these are what Homer comes back with to try and get people back on Poochie's side.
Nice. So we see the businesswoman. Do we ever find out what that businesswoman's name is?
There's a character called Lindsay Nagel who looks identical but with different colour modelling. So I think she was just a network woman for maybe 9 seasons or so, and then they made her a character.
Okay. But at this point, we don't know anything more about her really than she's just a network executive.
Yeah, no, she showed up under different, with the same voice and attitude under different guises several times over the years.
And so basically, the Roger Myers, Krusty, and the network executive are strong arming the writers into introducing Poochie to the Itchy and Scratchy show. We want the dog with attitude. Have you noticed they do the power stances, both the exec and Roger Myers and even Krusty at times do those power stances where, hands on your hips, or you spread your hands on your table and kind of bend over. And so she gets enthused and she shouts, like you said, he's edgy, he's in your face. You've heard the expression, let's get busy. Well, this is the dog who gets busy. And she kind of does that thing where she wags her finger and then she puts her head just from side to side a little bit like a sassy lady. And then she switches to corporate mode within a second, consistently and thoroughly. And then at some point she talks about being proactive, and one of the writers disses her for using jargon and gets fired, right? Yeah.
The writers, again, in a meta sort of situation, the writers are designed after some of the writers. So I think a couple of the guys on the other side of the table to Krusty and the lady are actual Simpsons writers.
Yeah, yes. You can tell that they're definitely based on real people because they don't look very Simpsons-y.
Especially the guy with the glasses and the hat.
Yes. I thought one of them was Groening, but he's not. By that point, he's not in the writer's room, maybe. Basically, they shout at they need to bring this dog in with all this youth speak, this 90s cheap-ass Nickelodeon kind of skateboard stuff that Tim and Eric are always parodying. And Roger Myers puts his hands on the table and says, so the rest of you writers start thinking of a name for this funky dog. I don't know, something along the lines of, say, Poochie, but more proactive. Krusty intensely puts his hands on the table and shouts, yeah, be funny. Does he say be funny? Because that got me thinking of the Louis C.K. thing with David Lynch, where Louis C.K. wants to take over from David Letterman. I don't know if you've seen that sketch. And David Lynch is playing the network executive and he goes, be funny, do something funny. And Louis C.K. goes, well, I'm not really that kind of comedian. I do monologues. Do the funny. Yeah, I'm going to count to 10. You got to do the funny. And he's like, it's not, I don't. And in the end, he kind of just goes, and just makes funny noises and farting sounds. And he goes, you've got yourself a week.
I have seen that from the show, isn't it? From the Louis show.
Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, they do this again, a season or two later with Love Day. They have a marketing room talking about they need a new holiday, and then the man says we need something like Love Day, only not so lame. And then it just cuts to Marge saying Happy Love Day, everyone. Yeah, so the writers kind of lampoon themselves a little bit for being spineless or lazy or whatever, and just going with the lowest common denominator. So they all just turn and say, so Poochie's okay? And everyone just says all right, and then they So they essentially built the character through lazy, low-hanging pitches of 90s buzzwords.
But what will he look like? As you described earlier on some of your ideas, the 10% more rastified is my favorite line.
Yeah, that's probably the best one. I do like, again, just the idea of these sort of middle-aged people assuming they know what, like 12 to 13-year-old children want. So I do like the phrase hip-hop context.
Yeah. Can we give him a bit more of a hip-hop context? Forget context, he's got to be a surfer. And it's like, he's brilliant. So basically, there's an artist, apparently David Silverman, showing here, and he's basically the guy, or one of the guys who's responsible for the original Simpsons designs, the sketchy, sharp Tracy Ullman version. Roger Myers is berating the artist who's drawn the most generic dog possible. And he shouts, no, he was supposed to have some attitude. And it's that brilliant thing where someone's trying to describe an abstract concept and they've not really got it in their head and they've no idea of what it should be. Just make it better. Just make it better. It's like, basically, no more attitude. And he waves his fingers and then he just goes, sunglasses.
Yeah, he's sort of like, Poochie's sort of like a Frankenstein's monster of 4 or 5 people's eyes, like, because you've got the animator's original design, and then you've got Krusty and Roger Myers and this network executive. So you got 4 there, and then you also have the real life design, which probably was 2 or 3 people.
The funny thing is that they've all got a bit of an idea of what this character should be, but no one really cares enough to put any thought into it or make it have any discernible features other than just like the cheapest buzzword. And this is obviously what was going on at The Simpsons at the time as well. And just, it reminds me a little bit, I don't know if you see that. Do you see the Spider-Man musical Turn Off the Dark that bombed on Broadway, and they tried for years to get it on? I think in the end it was written by U2, and it just went through change after change where it just seemed like nobody really had any idea what they wanted to do with it, and they just kept adding more and more ridiculous things to it, throwing more and more shit at the wall and hoping that something will stick.
Very lost.
Just adding more and more with no idea of where you're going with it. And the artist gives us the 90s monster that is Poochie. So he's got flirred like loose jeans, the open check shirt, the backwards baseball cap. He has nunchucks in his pocket that I had never noticed before.
Yeah.
And he's on 2 feet and has sunglasses. This got me thinking of what Maude might look like in a 90s hip-hop surfer context. And who knows? Maybe that's something that you can tackle one fine day.
Perhaps.
10% more rastified.
See what we can do with her.
And Poochie is born. Now, Poochie actually was a toy in the 80s. Have you seen it? If you type in Poochie into the interwebs, a lot of the things you get back are there's this little Mattel toy with pink streaks in its hair.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that prior, but it makes sense because it's just a lazy name, isn't it? It's an easy sell.
Yeah, it's one step up from like the dog or something like that.
Yeah. Dog toy.
And this comes back as well of like not really caring. Like you could add Poochie to literally any show with the amount of connection he has to the characters and context of Itchy and Scratchy. He's so generic you could literally add him to any show, which is where Roy comes in. So what do you want
to
tell us about Roy?
Roy, I remember just I didn't understand the whole concept as a 9-10-year-old, whatever I was. So I just kind of really enjoyed Roy, and I did want him to stick around. And that's sort of, I remember them doing there's a couple of comics that I remember where Roy had sort of like a bit of a role, and that was always quite good. I think Roy will probably get his own cast at some point, because I imagine he's also returned in some shape or form in the 22 years since this.
And if not, hey, it wouldn't be that hard for us to pad out an episode with Roy's diary and the Roy Internet Museum and Database, and hey, we can do a Roy cast. Probably do season of Roy casts.
It won't be far off just non-ironically reintroducing Roy at this point.
Well, the thing is that he's basically a college-age man who just turns up for no reason. So he's not even like the cool kind of Poochie kind of type. He's not like he comes in on a skateboard, but that would just be Bart Simpson. So basically, I imagine in the writer's room, they were like, let's make Roy just like Poochie, where he's extreme and in your face. And they're like, that would just be another version of Bart.
Yeah, Roy's very like laid back and passive and just sort of hanging around. And he only says about 4 things and then he leaves to go and live with 2 foxy ladies.
Yeah, he's the Fonz, essentially, dressed as Poochie. And he even calls them Mr. and Mrs. S, I think, which is what the Fonzie calls them, Mr. and Mrs. C in Happy Days.
Yes, I think they did that with Happy Days as well, didn't they? They brought like a relative or 2 in that had always been like upstairs or something.
I don't know about Happy Days, but Happy Days is one of those shows that had a bunch of spin-offs. Mork and Mindy was a spin-off of Happy Days. Laverne and Shirley, Joni Loves Chachi. So I think they had 3 or 4. They did an animated Happy Days cartoon in which had a time machine in it. Those are prime for those kind of things. But I don't know. But obviously they jumped the shark, as that is a reference from that exact show.
It is. Would you like to move on to the clip?
I would like to move on to the clip. So clip 1, you want to give the rundown or do you want me to?
You can go for it. I've made some notes that I will throw in at the end.
It's a big one. So stop me if you've heard it before. They fight, they bark and fight and bark, bark, bark. There's a new Itchy and Scratchy opening in which they've shoehorned the word bark and woof, woof, woof. This adds absolutely nothing to the show. And he's got a new logo with Itchy, Scratchy, and Poochie. So we have the classic Itchy and Scratchy setup with a fireworks factory half a mile away. And they're on their way. They're in their car, Itchy and Scratchy together. And they just see Poochie hitchhiking with his surfboard. Itchy and Scratchy pull up in the car. Look, Scratchy, it's our new friend Poochie. What's that name again?
Which that implies that they've already met him off camera. And then it gets a weird Itchy and Scratchy episode because Itchy and Scratchy are both friends and just talking, which they don't do that often. So it's a good start.
Yeah, it just serves to show how they had to like twist every element of Itchy and Scratchy to incorporate Poochie into the story. And then, as Milhouse soon points out, it doesn't go well. So basically, Scratchy then says, "What's that name again? I forgot." And then Poochie starts rapping in his Homer's voice, right? "My name's Poochie D, and I rock the telly. I'm half Joe Camel and a third Fonzarelli. I'm a kung fu hippie from Gangster City. I'm the rapping surfer, you the fool I pity."
Very like a cultural overload in an attempt to make him sort of relevant or place him in this sort of like zeitgeist of a very specific late 80s, early 90s. Like the things he's mentioned are very, like early television, like the Fonz and the Smoking Camel and Mr. T.
Yeah.
They do specify what breed of dog Poochie is as well in this clip.
Really?
You know what the
Beagle.
breed is? It is a beagle, I think. Well, it's called the Beagle Has Landed, so we're going to guess that Poochie's a beagle.
I think so. What's that other cartoon beagle dog? The one that's like a long sausagey. Is that a sausage dog? There's the same thing.
Cat dog.
Cat dog. No, I can't remember. It might be an English cartoon from like the newspapers. Rubbish anyway.
I don't remember that.
Scratchy turns to Itchy. "Poochie is one outrageous dude. Itchy, he's totally in my face." Now Poochie's got a flying V guitar and he's just playing it. He's going wiggity, 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 word up, rock on, party on. And he's just doing every 90s trope he can get his hands on.
He's a fan of recycling.
He is. So we cut immediately now to like, this is Homer's first time on the show. And so that all the people are sitting there, including Ned, but not
Maude.
Not Maude, no Rod, no Todd, no Maude, but Ned's there. And
He doesn't care for that.
She will not care for this at all, I don't think. She's not going to want the children. I'm surprised even Neddy was allowed to go. He probably pretended to go next door to get his hedge clippers back. Milhouse sits up and says, "When are they going to get to the fireworks factory?" Sobbing. So we cut back to Poochie, who's now riding a mountain bike down like a half pipe skateboard kind of thing, bouncing a basketball. He rides up, slam dunks the basketball into the backboard with a wailing guitar solo, and then swings into their car. Shouts, "Catch you on the flip side, dude meisters." Extends his hand to Itchy and Scratchy to shake their hand and shouts, "Not!" And then looks right at the camera and gets super preachy. "Hey kids, always recycle to the extreme." And then he drives away. Itchy and Scratchy, I'm guessing, never get to the fireworks factory.
No, that's the end of the cartoon. He just drives past the fireworks factory. So everything about Poochie is a hindrance. And I like Milhouse's reaction is just a reflection of what the audience think about Poochie, is that he's just delaying things. And I do like that Milhouse gets so worked up that it makes him cry.
I kind of like that, but I think, and I don't know whether I missed this, but I think there'd be a few people like you with the Roy, and I quite like Roy, who'd be like, "Hey, I think this dude's pretty cool." And but take a couple of episodes to realize this dude is not only not cool, he's also, not only is he super annoying, he's also detracting from everything we originally loved about the show.
The kids are also, what's good is that the kids are just too smart for this. Like all of the kids, like you don't really see a great spectrum of kids reacting to this, but the ones that you do see, just see right through Poochie.
Well, there's the clip beforehand where they're trying to do like a focus group with the kids, and it turns out Myers comes from behind the screen exasperated at the kids because he's like, "You want a totally down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall, and you don't know what you want, you kids."
If you look at the description that the guy says when he repeats what the kids have asked for, though, he lists like 3 or 4 things like contradicting each other, but it's a pretty good summary of Rick and Morty when you look at it.
Really?
Yeah, it's like you want a grounded character with like relationships who goes on these like wild adventures in outer space. It's pretty close to what Rick and Morty ended up being.
Well, we should go with continuing with the Harmon theme of mentioning him several times in every single episode, but clearly he just took those tropes and took it to the extreme.
Poochie would be a fan of.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say this is sort of the world's first response to Poochie, and it doesn't work on anybody, which is strange because you'd think this sort of network, they know how to attract, like the things they're doing are going to attract idiots, but it doesn't even work on that level this time. Nobody likes Poochie.
I think in 22 minutes they didn't quite have the nuance to dig into the highs and lows of Poochie. Had this been a very special episode, a 1 hour episode or whatever, maybe we'd have got a little bit more detail there. Clip 2. So this is essentially the second time Poochie appears. They're in a field in TV World. Scratchy is in a block of ice, and Itchy is in the process of impaling him with a chainsaw. They stop, and Poochie walks on stage, right? And Itchy says, "Hey, Poochie, you look like you've got something to say. Do you?" "Yes, I certainly do." And I think what Homer wanted to say was, "Hello there, Itchy. I know there's a lot of people who don't like me." And does he say this?
He does. Yeah, he records a whole speech like that everybody cries at, including Roger Myers.
Yeah, but he doesn't get included, does it?
No, he does the whole he does the whole speech about how Poochie is like, give him a chance, and
because it's a really good one, but I couldn't remember it was actually Poochie said it, and then they still offed him. But hey, hello there, Itchy. I know there's a lot of people who don't like me and wish I would go away, and I think we got off on the wrong foot. I know I can come off a little proactive, and for that I'm sorry. But if everyone could find a place in their heart for the little dog nobody wanted, I know we can make him laugh and cry till we grow old together.
And then everybody cries, including Krusty and Roger Myers, and then they basically just don't tell Homer anything from that point, and he watches it assuming that's going to come on, and then obviously they've replaced it last minute.
And would you like to tell us what the iconic scene is that they have now replaced it with?
Yeah, he says, "I have to go now, my planet needs me." And then they didn't even animate him floating upwards, they just had the cell move upwards. Like you can see the cell numbers. And then a handwritten card that says, note, Poochie died on the way back to his home planet.
And then he cut back to Krusty, and that's when he's cheering, and he's like, yeah, Poochie's dead, and we'll never see him again. Here is legal proof that we'll never bring him back.
Yeah. So they sort of, in that last, 5 seconds of Poochie, you find out that he's an alien, and he dies.
It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to happen. And again, we dump on Lost or whatever shows like that. And the comics are the worst for this. Obviously they've put 50 issues in, and someone just says, "Oh, we have to finish it." And so they just have to round up hundreds of pages of comic in 3 pages or something. But that's capitalism for you, isn't it, mate?
It is. With that, Poochie's dead.
And with that, Poochie is dead. However, it's not the end of Poochie. But not by a long shot.
Before we move on, I forgot to mention I think clip 1, one of my favourite lines that I left out was after everybody leaves because of how bad Poochie was. Homer's looking to his friends to say supportive things, and Carl says you should be really proud, and then looks around and says you've got a lovely home here, and leaves.
Nice. So clip 3, I believe, is the first ever Treehouse of Horror that we've talked about on the Maude Cast or any of the casts. So this is season 10, episode 4. The Itchy and Scratchy are driving a police car dressed as cops. Poochie is skateboarding down the street with a surfboard under his arm, and he shouts, "Hey, hey, Wiggly Wiggly, Poochie's in the house." The police car smacks into Poochie, sending him flying into the air. He lands, and comedically, as always, the skateboard goes up in the air and then comes down on his head. And I said, followed by surfboard, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
No, I think that's it. He just, this is the Halloween special where Lisa and Bart get teleported into the Itchy and Scratchy world and try and get killed. So they're not watching. It's hard to kind of grasp what's going on because Homer is watching it on TV because he says, "I wonder how Bart and Lisa are going to get out of this one." But it's also not a scripted episode of a television show. It's just sort of happening they cross dimensions basically to the dimension where Itchy and Scratchy. So Poochie is still there for some reason, not dead, and also still sounds like Homer without Homer having to record any dialogue for Poochie.
That's wild. But of course, it's Itchy and Scratchy world, and so Treehouse of Horror, all bets are off.
The other note I made is that it's a very Maude thing to do to have Poochie just come back to die again.
Yes, it's weird, but I'm glad Poochie comes along. He's a nice little Easter egg for us in that episode. But that's it. That's all we've got to say about that.
Yep, that's it.
Clip 4, Little Big Mom, season 11. Scratchy is dead in a coffin. I'm assuming this is inside the show itself. Poochie is paying respects, takes off his baseball cap, pats the dead body of Scratchy on the head, and then does clicks his tongue, and then there's a hey hand sign towards the camera, and then that's it.
Yeah, I forgot actually. Clip 3. I noticed in a screenshot I was getting yesterday for a image for MC19 that when Poochie's hit by the car and flies upwards, you briefly see his eyes under his glasses, which was pretty good.
Nice.
I'd never seen Poochie's eyes before this. The clip 4, the Little Big Mom. I imagine they were having the storyline was that Itchy was sad because Scratchy had actually died or whatever. So they needed people to attend the funeral, and I don't think they've got any other characters really knocking about that they could use, so they had to bring Poochie back. The only note I've made about this is this episode we also looked at in the Stu Cast, which means this is the only episode, I think the only episode that features Maude, Disco Stu, and Poochie.
Wow. So we're going to come to it 3 different times at least.
With our second round on it already.
Well, that's cool. Not much more to say to that other than this idea of Poochie essentially now in canon is back to life in Itchy and Scratchy land, assuming that these episodes are in chronological order, because I don't think Scratchy stays dead. He dies in every episode anyway, so that's irrelevant.
Yeah, so Poochie maybe. Again, a bit of a Maude thing going on in that some characters on The Simpsons can die, like Moleman, Dr. Nick, have died horrifically several times, especially Moleman, and then just come back to life as if nothing had happened. Whereas Maude and Poochie, pretty much once they were dead, they were dead. There was no coming back, except Poochie occasionally and Maude occasionally.
And those are the things we love. We love those little trails. On to clip 5, Kill Gill, volumes 1 and 2, season 18. So where a character is coming onto an ice rink, there seems to be a trail of blood underneath them. And it is Matrix Poochie, i.e. it is a man dressed as a mascot of Poochie, which is the costume of Neo from the Matrix, doing like that leaning back thing where the bullets are flying around him. Krusty on ice. That's all I know.
That's pretty much all I know as well. I don't think I've seen this episode for a very long time, and I didn't rewatch it when I was getting this clip. I just watched maybe 30 seconds before and after this, and it's all... There's a couple of mascots that come out on the ice. The last one being just after Poochie, the last one, Krusty shows. Sideshow Mel comes on, looking really glum, just looking down at the floor, and Krusty announces, and all the way from his dad's funeral, Sideshow Mel.
Jeez.
But yeah, I don't really know what the context is, but again, I imagine they just needed a character that was I imagine they'd already used Itchy and Scratchy. And I know there was like a rib lizard, like a rib sandwich lizard that they used as well, and then Matrix Poochie. But it's just a reference to 90s cash-in merchandise, isn't it? Like Matrix Barbie.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a commentary on sticking a hot property on top of anything else. And here in Japan, where I live in the real world, you'll see like shameless. I mean, this is everywhere, but Pokemon everything: Pokemon curry, Pokemon chopsticks, Pokemon rice. Literally every single thing will at some point has had either Mario or Pikachu on it.
Which, yeah, Japan specifically, like The Simpsons had that, you know, from like 1990 to 1994, 95, there was, you know, Simpsons everything. Even now you can still buy, you know, like Tic Tacs and stuff. But the fact that Mario and Pikachu have been pushing out like, you know, like Pikachu, like Band-Aids and like Pikachu pencil toppers and for well over 20 years successfully is quite impressive.
Very impressive. Nintendo clearly, they've got a hit on their hands there.
Yeah, but without dignity.
not required in the world of cash money. Clip 6, The Nightmare Before Christmas, season 28. So we take a massive leap forward of 10 years. And what is that now? We are 20 years after Poochie's first original appearance. And they were back in Itchy and Scratchy world. Itchy and Scratchy are pointing guns at each other and they shoot. And one of them says Isaiah 2, and the other one says 4. And Isaiah 2:4 is they shall beat their swords into plowshares. Basically a plea for useful peace. And I'm thinking here, is this Flanders involved in this? He's got to be. He's got to be.
I thought that, yeah. I think it's Lovejoy. I think it's more the actual institution of the church rather than... Because in the early days, this would have just been like Ned, Maude, Helen, and Marge. But I don't really have any context for it other than I think Krusty is trying to appeal to Christians.
Really?
I don't know why.
Because he's Jewish.
I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, and also his daughter's there, so I don't know how she comes into it. Like his daughter briefly appears at the end of this clip, like watching this sort of special. So
okay,
I don't really know how it all connects, but yeah, it's also odd. It's been since between clip 4 and 6, there's 17 years. So why bring Poochie back now, and why for this?
So it's kind of weird because the Itchy and Scratchy decide to get all Christian, and they say, I think it's about time we put on some clothes, and then they get dressed in sensible clothing, essentially dressed as Ned Flanders. Poochie rides in on rollerblades with like a gold chunky crucifix around his neck and a halo. He spins and then he shouts, and this happened. And then he does his hip hop kind of like stance where he leans back and hugs himself. I know what his message, Christianity is stupid and boring. And I guess this is where it is, right? Because they ruined the original Itchy and Scratchy by bringing in a character who added nothing, in fact, detracted. And this religion's doing exactly the same thing as Poochie did. Is that You think that's the meta comment?
I think you're giving them a bit too much credit for season 28. I just imagined it's either a parody of something before my time or after my time, cartoon wise. Like it seems very specific. You know, don't you get those sort of like, I'm thinking of like Rocky and Bullwinkle or something. Or so just something where to end a scene in a cartoon, a different character would come on, you like pull the screen across to like the new.
Sure, a little bit better, and a lot of those updates of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons did that kind of stuff when they were trying to get a little bit groovy, the groovy ghoulies and the 70s Flintstones. But I don't know whether. So you think I'm giving them too much Cerebus level kudos on this? That basically they're saying you can ruin a show by bringing in these generic characters, but you can also ruin it by making it religious and preachy.
It could be. I'm again thinking it could just be the fact that Itchy and Scratchy were already doing something and they needed a way to get out the scene, so they needed a third character to talk. And in that world, there is pretty much only Poochie. It's just weird that it hasn't come up for 17 years.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that in that 17 years, they haven't introduced any other characters into Itchy and Scratchy world that they could just bring in, like an occasional squirrel or whatever.
Yeah, or the like the tasteless maid from Tom and Jerry, who I believe was called Calpurnia.
Really?
I think she had the same name as the To Kill a Mockingbird maid.
Okay. Well, it was different times, Nathan. Let's just leave it at that.
Certainly. The last thing I had to say about Clip 6 was again Homer's involvement. Like, did Homer go and record that line, and then this happened? Like, is Homer still, in some kind of contract for Poochie? Like, does he have to go in and do these lines if he's required to, or is it a sound alike? It's just weird that Homer it sort of fits in. It would be a good sort of gag that Homer has just still been recording lines for Poochie all these years.
Yeah, and they could have taken a dig at Roswell by having him demand $4,000 for it, and then them firing him and killing Poochie off again.
Yeah, they could have. Maybe one day. I think, but I do like this new gold crucifix with the halo Poochie. I think it's a pretty cool design. Of all the Poochies, I think this is my favorite. I like Matrix Poochie.
Matrix Poochie, you can't go wrong with it. Clip 7 now. Clip 7 is the last official clip from Dogtown, the episode Dogtown. And here's the real thing. It's the only in canon real world appearance of Poochie, because you see Bart and Lisa stuck up a tree where the dogs have gone wild, including groundskeeper Willie by the looks of it. Poochie's in the background. You helpfully found him flipping his nunchucks around menacingly. Is it Poochie or perhaps a human costumed as him? What's going on here?
When I was looking up what clips to use on the Simpsons wiki, it has Poochie's appearances, which is lucky. And for this one, it says Poochie or somebody in a Poochie suit. So there is the idea that it could be, but I think it's just Poochie because Groundskeeper Willie's sort of gone feral. I feel like I've seen this episode maybe once. It's only a couple of years old. It's like 2 or 3 years old, I think. So this is the most recent thing we've looked at all in the Maude Cast, I think. I just think he's real, and they've given up and become the sort, like you were saying before about, was this before? But the Simpsons used to sort of it used to be an anarchy, sort of. It used to be the thing against the establishment, and now it's just kind of a large part of the establishment. Like it was making fun of culture, and then it became one of the biggest parts of culture. So it sort of lost its edge, but still enjoyable. I still enjoy, especially the last season they did. I thought that was a pretty good return to form. But I do think that at this point they've just started. In the early days, they tried not to be a cartoon very much, but I think that's kind of gone away now. I think it is just supposed to be like, oh look, isn't that funny? It's Poochie, without the logic of a podcast behind it.
Without the logic of a podcast. So you think basically they've said, oh, it'd be funny if we put that dog in there, Poochie, just in the background as an Easter egg for people, and we won't try and explain it.
But also, Sumker has clearly gone into it because he is brandishing and using nunchucks, which he has had since his first appearance.
It is the first time the nunchucks had been out. In 20 odd years. It took him 25 years to come out of the pocket, but finally he proved that he does have those kung fu skills.
So it's nice. I will take this sort of in your face laugh at continuity for the balance of attention to detail.
Yes, I will give them that. And I don't know if you saw Doomsday Clock is the DC's attempt to bring the Watchmen characters from Alan Moore's Watchmen into the proper DC universe. Garbage. But it's the same kind of thing. You can bring a fictional character in, and Marvel did this when they destroyed the Ultimates universe, but they wanted to keep Miles Morales, so they had to kind of like wangle all the rules and the laws and bring him over. Yes, I imagine they've just done something like that. If we want to, because if we're not giving them credit for their earlier analysis of how religion destroys TV shows, I don't think we should be giving them credit on putting a lot of thought into how Poochie got from the itchy and scratchy world into the real world. But we can make the assumption that he's there now. Although
it also opens up the path. Well, more so than ever, The Simpsons is now a TV show that could just bring Maud Flanders back to life without explanation and not feel any sort of repercussion for that.
Yeah,
like they could just be like, oh yeah, here's a genie in a bottle, you get one wish, Ned. So they could just do something very basic but it's weird that they're very stubborn about a couple of things. Like they will always keep the continuity on a couple of things, but then on other things it can be very, very loose.
It is insane. And I think this idea of, so there was a trope in, the TV show Dallas in the 80s was mercilessly mocked for, where a character who'd been dead for like seasons they just woke up one day and he was in the shower and they just said, oh, yeah, I'm back. That was all a dream. The last season of this show was all a dream. But everything that happened also happened in reality, but it was also a dream. You could just say, like, easily, they just wake up one day and Maud's just there and they never explain it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The Dallas thing was they erased like a full season of story, didn't they, by saying it was a dream, which again The Simpsons doesn't have much to erase. They could just say like it doesn't specify how long Ned's been dreaming for.
No, Maud could have been dead for like 6 months. Although he didn't get married in between, but Yeah.
Well, 9. This is the thing about the episode where she dies. We're getting off track here, but there's I think 9 months pass within the episode that she dies.
Okay. And that's quite specific in a place that doesn't really ever specify.
Yeah.
First of all, Sadgasm. Sadgasm for me was the place where they were really, it was obvious they were just messing around with the past.
Worst episode ever.
In most people's eyes, yes. Shall we round up this segment of the show with a little bit of a talk into the Simpsons game of 2008, in which Poochie does have a relatively large part?
Yeah, I like this on some level. I remember this game well. I think it came out to tie in with the movie, and there is a Maude reference in this game too that we will get to at some point.
Nice.
But it's not in this Grand Theft Scratchy level in which you encounter Poochie, which is the best level of the game, I think.
Really?
I enjoy it a lot.
He is the bad guy, right? He's the enemy. And he's on stage rapping and he says, I'm P to the O to the Chi, P to the double O, Chi, I'm the dog. Beep, he starts swearing and dropping all kinds of rudeness with his crappy rapping. He's now in like a 90s like basketball style outfit, rapping about gangsters and pimps and hoes, and then he has a go at Lisa and Marge for no good reason, calls Lisa a baby girl skank, and calls Maude, Marge, a blue herd hoochie, and says he's going to pop a cap in their asses. And
it's pretty violent. They had to get from zero to villain pretty quickly, given its I'm trying to remember the mechanics of the actual. The context within the game is that I think at this point in the game, they are aware that they are in a game and they have to go into 4 different games to collect something. And the game that Marge and Lisa go into is Grand Theft Scratchy, which is why he's sort of dressed in that sort of, like LA, California, sort of like 90s basketball vest look. And the note I made was bad dialogue and lyrics. But I do think that I don't think this was one of those cases where they, like a studio produces a game and then the Simpsons will just like sign off on it. I do think that the Simpsons writers were involved with this game.
Good Lord. I mean, they've tried to update him slightly, and now he's got like a 90s gangster kind of thing going on, and he's the bad guy. And he does the end when he's talking to Lisa and Marge, and this kind of like sign falls off on the floor and smashes and I think kills the dude. And he does like the disco Stu back away that's pretty cool.
It was a funny ending, and that's his style. He's not. That's probably the closest to. If Poochie's a real character and not a fictional character, that's the closest to his real personality. We might get to see him that he's just like, nope, see you later.
That's it, and that's the only point maybe where we see anything else to Poochie, because Disco Stu, when we talked about him, he had a lot of context, a lot of subtext, and we could dig in a lot. But Poochie really has nothing, and that's the whole point of Poochie, that he was created to have nothing other than external sheen of 90s coolness with absolutely nothing below it. But I can imagine a place where Disco Stu and Poochie have a few fun adventures, and they're
not too far away character-wise. I could see a good comic book team up. You got Disco Stu, Maude's Ghost, and Poochie. You're only sort of 2 away from a ghost-solving team.
A Scooby-Doo-esque
flip-flop.
Exactly. So Poochie's ramblings on this stage, he shouts, "That's how I roll. Wickedy whack, you're going to get smacked. Don't get up in Poochie's business. You hoes are the bomb," etc., etc.
Yeah, it's really cheap, but it's supposed to be imitating Grand Theft Auto, obviously, and they can't. This is the problem when you try as a PG sort of thing to parody something that isn't PG. It's sort of relatively difficult unless you make it like soft. Like if they'd done like a Flanders Theft Auto where it was all like very passive aggressive and nice, but Poochie is just sort of, he's being not that extreme really. He's just sort of being rude and saying irritating things.
Well, he's the least violent character of the three by far. We haven't seen him do anything other than swing some nunchucks, whereas Itchy and Scratchy, especially with Itchy, would just get the chainsaw out all the time. He's a violent psychopath.
Yeah, I don't know where I don't think Itchy and Scratchy actually feature in this level of this game.
Okay.
Strange.
Well, that's the content. That's been a lot of digging there into Poochie, far more than anyone really ever should. But thankfully, we've saved the dregs for Poochie Cast 2, which is no doubt coming up one day soon. Shall we move into some Poochie art? I've chosen a few pieces here. First one here is a piece by Ryan Wood that I got off the Twitter, which is a mixture of Krampus, Poochie, and Shaggy DA from the 1976 Disney movie. Can you see it?
No.
It's on your phone, dude. So what we have here is a version of basically a monster version of Poochie with a huge chain, and he's got massive horns and fur. And it's pretty cool. He's got like a tongue as long as your arm.
Yeah, this is a great one. It does have a K on it for Krampus, I'm assuming. What a strange thing to do. What
a strange mixture of three characters who have very, very little connection in my eyes, but they're all a bit shaggy. And
that's sort of the way forward with Maude art probably is to pick something random from the internet and pair it with her. So I'm liking this.
I'm liking
Krampus Poochie.
And it's a pretty cool, spooky kind of image as well. Number 2, though. How about that one? You got kind of like a day glow blue and pink Poochie, just super aggressive and snarly. His eyes are sparkling. He doesn't have blood on his teeth, but he may as well have. That's a super cool piece of art by Dead Name from the nohomers.net.
This is a creepy one, but detailed, and he has way more attitude in this than he did. And he also seems to have been rastified by 10% at least.
10% more than he was before, so that's he's approaching 20%, considering he had 0 rasta in him when he originally started.
And they've updated his outfit to be more modern. Yeah, he's sort of spooky. This would have been a better villain for the game if they'd had Poochie sort of, like mutate
He does seem like a bit mutant werewolfy, and he definitely has, as you say, a whole lot of attitude. So well done there, Dead Name. Moving on, we don't have a lot of time. We have all the time in the world. Number 3,
Wow.
Poochie Goes Wild. Now, we've generally stayed away from any pornographic or super rude pictures, and this isn't really either of those, but Poochie, it's getting there though. Poochie is dressed in bondage gear, and he's drinking a Duff beer and smoking a doobie, and he's on like a 90s Nickelodeon style background. Poochie Goes Wild, X-rated by King Constantine on the Twitter.
Yeah, this is a strange one. What I can't determine is who it's for.
Somebody who wants Poochie to have 18% more attitude.
Yeah, it's a question nobody needed answering, but there's the answer.
He's wearing a dog collar.
And yeah, very 90s shoes as well.
Yeah,
keeping with the Poochie aesthetic is all there. And who's to say this isn't what Poochie meant by extreme?
That's right. To the extreme, I rock a mic like a vandal. He can see his eyes as well through the glasses, so we got a little treat there.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice that. Yeah, that's fun.
All in all, brilliant there from King Constantine. I'd like you to rank these 3 in your favorites. It's hard because they're all awesome piece of Poochie art. What's your favorite of the 3?
My favorite of the 3 is, I'm going to go in backwards order, I think. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Would you like to fill us in? Would you like to fill the audience in on why that is the case?
Number 3 is the most creatively weird, which is difficult considering number 1 is creatively obscure. Number 1 and 2 I like. They're all pretty close. There's not a lot in this. But number 2 is more of that sort of... I've got a picture in my mind that I don't know how to describe, but a really freakish, like green, sort of screaming face with big eyes. Not too dissimilar from the Ghost Maude look, actually, but maybe on a small car. Does that ring any bells?
The rat Fink, the rat kind of character?
Possibly. It reminds me of something that I've seen before that freaks me out.
It's freaky.
Number 1 is the least Simpsons-y, but Poochie's a good character to do that with, and it doesn't look unnatural. It doesn't look cartoony, which is hard to do when you're working with a cartoon doll.
I think they've kind of Hanna-Barberized it a little bit. So I think each one of them subverts or messes with Poochie in a different way. And I kind of agree. The third one is the one that keeps most of what makes Poochie Poochie, but still subverts it and messes with it in a pretty extreme. 2 kind of ups the extreme level and makes him wild and aggressive. And the first one is just bizarre. It just mashes together 3 very interesting takes. So all in all, good. But I want to finish up with possibly the most appropriate and worst piece of Poochie art, which is literally a sticker of the screen that says Poochie died on his way back to his home planet, which you can buy on Redbubble for $3.54. And in their picture, it's just stuck unconvincingly onto a water bottle. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's not actually stuck onto the water bottle. It's just overlaid on like Photoshop, isn't it? It's not physically on that water bottle.
No, that's how Redbubble do it, right? They'll take a picture and they have the generic backdrop, and then everything is just fitted onto it to just give you an example. But what I realize is it's as lazy as the original Poochie. In fact, it's more lazy. They've literally just taken the laziest part and made it into the laziest product available that you can then buy for the ridiculous price of $3.54.
How are they allowed to make a profit off that?
I don't know, because I think it's one of those cease and desist things, because if you go into Redbubble, it's full of people who've literally just taken things directly from somewhere else. But this is pretty heinous because it hasn't been changed in any way. You know,
no.
There's a mile of difference between those 3 beautiful pieces of Poochie art and this crass piece of consumer babbage.
Yeah, it's also it's one of the rare things that you could easily achieve yourself, because it's just bad handwriting. You could just get a flask and some lipstick and achieve this yourself. It's not like
that can be everyone's homework. Please get yourself a flask and some lipstick and make the Poochie note. Send it in. Send photos in, and we'll a prize to the big winner.
A Poochie flask.
A Poochie flask to the non-winner. So there we are. We've done it. We've reached the end. I was going to suggest you did a Poochie blog as a tribute to our Maude Cast diary, but I don't think it's appropriate.
I think we've covered all we need on Poochie.
All bases for Poochie 1. Roy didn't get much saying in there. But now, of course, we all need to go back to our home planets. So shall we finish up with a Poochie song?
Sure.
How about a Poochie rap? Are you off? Are you ready for it?
Sure.
Who's going first?
Me.
Go for it.
Proactive attitude.
Louder and angrier with access to a time machine.
Consistently, thoroughly.
We want a dog with attitude. Busy.
Kung Fu hippie. Gangster city.
I don't know, something along the lines of, say, Poochie, but more proactive.
Fireworks factory.
You'll never get there, you spineless writers.
Alien life form.
Make it light green. Oh, you know, attitude, you just know. Sunglasses.
A Maude connection.
Shaggier. Super big.
Matrix Poochie.
Roy Poochie.
Isaiah 2-4 Poochie.
To the extreme Poochie.
Bad dialogue and lyrics Poochie.
Sensible clothing Poochie.
Funky Poochie.
Dogtown.
Cerberus.
The original 5-headed dog from Springfield.
Joe Camel.
Yay.
The end.
The end. We did it.
Good job.
Poochie Cast 1. Successful.
A good show.
That was a good show. That was
Thorough.
an hour and 20.
Probably.